San Francisco Bay is a hostile maritime environment. The water is freezing, the currents are aggressive, and the tides pull violently toward the open ocean. Sitting directly in the middle of this hazard is Alcatraz. By 1934, the federal government had engineered this isolated rock into a maximum security containment system. This dashboard outlines the quantitative baseline: double rows of 12-foot fencing, 24/7 armed guards, and 12 daily headcounts. For decades, the output remained constant, 0 successful exits. But on the morning of June 12, 1962, the headcount came up short. 3 men were gone. The primary architect was Frank Morris. With a recorded IQ of 133, he applied his intellect entirely toward adversarial planning and exploiting institutional weaknesses. His operators were John and Clarence Anglin. While Morris supplied the strategic framework, the Anglin brothers brought highly specific expertise in swimming and maritime survival. They didn't break out through brute force. They engaged in an exercise of adversarial engineering. They systematically mapped the prison's structural blind spots and procedurally dismantled its defenses from the inside out. Over the course of months, they proved that a supposedly flawless facility possessed critical vulnerabilities, permanently destroying the illusion of an inescapable prison. To compromise the structure, Morris mapped the boundaries and isolated cell block B. The ventilation shafts sitting directly above were unsealed, leaving an accessible path to the roof. Reaching it meant getting through their cell grates into a completely unmonitored utility corridor. Getting into that corridor required boring through an 8-inch wall of reinforced concrete surrounding their vents. They needed industrial tools in a resource-starved environment. By stealing a vacuum cleaner motor and repurposing metal dining hall spoons, they engineered a functional motorized rotary drill. Operating power tools inside a quiet cell block immediately introduces a new problem: sonic detection. To solve this, they employed a technique known as acoustic masking. Each day, the prison mandated an hour of high-decibel music for the inmates, if guards hear you trying to break it. They could only access the corridor because they mapped and neutralized the facility's auditory surveillance first. Once they breached the concrete, the inmates climbed into the blind utility corridor and established a covert manufacturing workshop. Escaping the building was only the first phase. Surviving the bay required maritime equipment. They stole 50 standard-issue raincoats, vulcanizing the rubber material to construct a makeshift raft. To rapidly inflate the raft in the dark, Morris repurposed a musical concertina, converting the instrument into an industrial air pump. This manufacturing process required hours of labor inside the corridor at night. The critical threat to this operation was the strict patrol schedule, which relied on direct visual audits of the cells to ensure compliance. If a guard looked into a cell and saw an empty bed, the system would immediately trigger a lockdown. To spoof the visual audits, they had to leave something behind. They fabricated hyper-realistic decoys using a mixture of plaster, soap, and toothpaste. To complete the illusion, Clarence Anglin collected actual human hair from the prison salon, attaching it to the tops of the dummy heads. By converting basic hygiene supplies and rain gear into evasion tools, they weaponized the facility's mundane inventory against its own strict security protocols. The execution phase began on the night of June 11, 1962. Moments after the 9:30 p.m. lights out command, the team made their move. One operator, Alan West, found his access hole was locked in place by cement that had hardened too quickly. Unable to breach his own wall, he was forced to remain behind. Morris and the Anglins slipped through their grates, entered the corridor, and climbed 30 feet of plumbing to the unsealed roof shaft. They forced the grate open, crawled across the flat roof, and descended an exterior pipe directly to the ground. Only the 12-foot perimeter fences now remained. By precisely timing the watchtower searchlights, they moved entirely within the dark environmental shadows, bypassing the final barrier and slipping into the freezing water. A wall or a fence provides a false sense of security. If the surveillance sweeping that architecture operates on a predictable loop, the resulting shadows offer a clear path right out the front door. The system didn't register the failure until the morning headcount. When a guard reached through the bars to wake an unresponsive inmate, the dummy head rolled onto the floor. The FBI and military forces immediately locked down the bay. After extensive searches yielded no bodies, the official government hypothesis concluded the men drowned, killed by thermal shock and aggressive tidal currents. The drowning theory was challenged when search teams recovered a handmade paddle and raft fragments washed up on nearby Angel Island. Furthermore, the bay's impassability was disproven. In December 1962, inmate John Paul Scott swam the distance without a raft, proving physical survival was viable. There was corroborating intelligence on the mainland. On the night of the escape, a vintage Chevrolet was reported stolen in Marin County by 3 men, a detail completely aligning with the inmates' planned trajectory. Decades later, a photograph surfaced from Brazil dating 1975, purportedly showing the Anglin brothers. Modern facial recognition technology applied to the image has since confirmed the identities of the men with a high degree of confidence. Despite massive manhunts and thousands of leads, neither the FBI nor the U.S. Marshal Service have ever recovered the bodies or closed the active warrants. The structural integrity of Alcatraz was shattered. The systemic vulnerabilities exposed by Morris and the Anglins were too severe to patch, forcing the federal government to permanently shut the facility down just 9 months later. The 1962 breach proved a harsh reality in security engineering. No matter how much concrete and steel you pour, the most rigid containment system in the world will inevitably fall to a disciplined adversary willing to map its blind